Soaring inflation, class and cultural warfare, spiralling debt. 2022 is like the 70s without the great music, big hair, funky fashions and unprotected sex. And just like the 70s, the leaders of the trade unions are once again seeking to bankrupt Britain in the way they did 5 decades ago. Everyone and their mum wants to go on strike, including today the Royal Mail, who have announced plans to stop delivering letters. Will we notice the difference? Crumbs, if only there was an electronic alternative for mail. Frenzied calls across multiple industries to down tools is why the RMT battle is such a test case for economic sanity. If we fail to see off the rail industry, who was subsidised to the tune of £16 billion during the pandemic, and who must adapt to shrinking demand for rail services with so many working from home, there will be a domino effect of strike action across every sector you can think of. Barristers, teachers, civil servants and local government are all professionals who are now considering industrial action, and they are the tip of the iceberg. As Dominic Sandbrook points out in the Mail newspaper this week, wage demands in the 70s were sometimes in excess of 20 or 30%, and the then Prime Minister Harold Wilson all too often paid up. What was the consequence? Well, eye-watering inflation, which topped out at 26%. Pay increases to tackle inflation achieve just the opposite, inflating prices further. It's economic quicksand, a race to the bottom. Things got so bad in the 70s, the dead remained unburied, and Britain went to the International Monetary Fund to borrow billions. What bothers me most is how little we've learned from our mistakes of the past, in particular the 1970s, when Britain was widely known as the sick man of Europe. How many times has history shown us that socialism doesn't work and that it is a doomed economic model? I embrace ideas of the left and I'm a former Labour voter. I may have good reason to support them again in the future. Here's hoping. I back the principle of free education and healthcare and a welfare state that supports the weakest in our society. Most people do. I don't want to live in an ultra-capitalist dystopia where government policy is geared exclusively towards the super-rich, featuring tax cuts for millionaires, whilst ordinary members of the public on slave labour incomes live in bad housing and have poor education and health. That's not a Britain I want to live in. I want everyone to thrive. But with extreme political correctness, this woke takeover of our culture, and with trade unions seemingly dictating government policy, including pushing for school closures during the pandemic, it seems to me that socialism is back. So what is socialism? Well, it's a collectivist ideology in which the individual matters for nothing. It's a philosophy in which there's no aspiration, no entrepreneurship, no impulse to make something of your life. The only ambition is to drag everyone down to the lowest common denominator, to decimate people's economic opportunities so they're dependent on the state. The Welsh Government are at it as we speak, with Mark Drakeford planning on literally handing out money to youngsters leaving care homes. £1,600 a month, that's right, £1,600 a month for 2 years, all for doing nothing. He says it's so they have the best possible chance in life and claims the state has a real obligation to support them as they start adulthood. But who's going to pay for this? What will it achieve? And what message will it send out? The furlough scheme was communism in action, literally the state paying people money to stay at home and twiddle their thumbs. It was Jeremy Corbyn's wet dream, all brought to us by a supposedly conservative Prime Minister in Boris Johnson. The pandemic ushered in a new era of British socialism, and we will pay the price. Our institutions and corporations have been infiltrated by socialism's evil sibling, wokeism, defining our history as full of shame, calling artistic geniuses like Shakespeare problematic, demonising the man who stopped Hitler, Winston Churchill, seeking the banning of books, sitcoms, comedians and pop songs, and of course their greatest hit of all, denying the basic facts of human biology, the fact that a man is a biological male and a woman is a biological female. Welcome to Bonkers 2022, where that has to be reiterated. Following 2 years of Chinese Communist Party-style measures like lockdowns and masking, we run the risk that our society and our economy will be based on hard-left collectivist principles for the foreseeable future. So many of the pandemic measures, including stay-at-home orders and mask wearing, fitted with the collectivist mechanism of control and of compliance. You will stay home. You will wear a mask. You will read the books we allow you to read. You will watch the news that we prepare for you. We will decide what vehicle you drive, how you heat your home, how often and where you travel. And you will take the medications that we prescribe, all for the common good. 2 years ago, far-fetched. Today, realistic. I make no apologies for wholeheartedly condemning socialism, a failed ideology and business model which has consistently brought countries to their knees wherever it has been practiced. I'll give you a free market West Germany versus state-controlled East Germany, from where you would be shot if you tried to escape. North Korea versus South Korea. Eastern Europe versus West. In the 1950s, resource-rich Venezuela was the fourth wealthiest country in the world. Today, following a prolonged experiment with socialism, Venezuela is poorer than it was prior to the 1920s. Its infrastructure is deteriorating and its economy shot to pieces. Hyperinflation has left the currency worthless and made it almost impossible for Venezuelans to afford basic necessities. Millions have fled, with almost 90% of the population living in poverty. Now, I am politically centre ground and have voted for all of the major parties in my life. But my allergy to socialism is born out of my youth in the 70s and early 80s, when hard-left central and local government presided over an economic disaster for Britain. And in the 80s, I watched loony left Labour authorities in London enforcing compulsory purchase orders on people's homes and bankrupting our great cities. God knows he made some mistakes and then some. But Tony Blair, a former Labour Prime Minister, actually banned the use of the word socialism from his party. So discredited was the word. And it was by eliminating failed, bonkers socialist ideas that Blair achieved 3 landslide victories. New Labour was a left-wing social democratic party, but it kept taxes as low as possible, was aspirational, and built on the positive aspects of Margaret Thatcher's legacy. It's no accident that in the 80s under Thatcher and in the late 90s under Blair, Britain enjoyed sustained economic growth. And yet these disastrous policies of tax and spend seem to be making an unwelcome return. Even the man who almost broke Britain, Mine Workers Union Chief Arthur Scargill, is back, like a particularly stubborn case of chlamydia. Makes me itch just looking at him. Let's learn from history, not repeat it. Let's not make the mistakes of the past. I've got 3 words for the unions who are seeking to set this country back decades, and for those preaching failed socialist ideas and trying to undermine capitalism and Western liberal ideas like free speech, free markets and democracy. To all of these people, I say no, no, no. The ghost of socialism is coming back to haunt us, and there's nowhere to hide. Be afraid. Be very afraid.